This is Evan Talks podcast, where we talk and share our mental health journey every other Monday. Our goal is to break the stigma of mental health and to help people along the way. Subscribe and be a part of this awesome new journey. Hey guys, before we get stuck into this week's episode, I wanted to share with you that Evan Talks pin badges, as mentioned in episode 3, are now available to order. The pin badges cost £10 each. All profits are going to Mind and Samaritans. So if you'd like to order yours, please email evan.talks2020@gmail.com with your full postal address and name, and I will give you payment details, and that way we can get them sent out to you in first class post. Thanks very much and enjoy this week's episode. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Evan Talks. Thank you very much for joining me. And continuing with the theme that we spoke about last episode, I'm going to be talking a little bit about workplace mental health as well. I'm very lucky to be joined by a colleague, a friend, somebody in the workplace that I look up to, and he's going to be talking to us about how he manages people with mental health problems in his work, but also in terms of how he thinks we can change and develop the environment so that we can make it a more inclusive environment for everyone to work in. So I'm speaking today to Andrew Boyd. Andrew, thank you so much for joining me. How are you today?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Good to see you.
And you. So I don't know if you want to start by just giving us a bit of a background as to who you are and where you come from, basically.
Okay, yes. So I was born in Carlisle, up in the beautiful north of England, and I joined the hospitality business 36 years ago. It's hard to believe when I look this young, but 36 years ago, I spent 26 years in hotels, working from washing the dishes to general manager. Work with Marriott and De Vere hotels, and I've been with Compass since 2012. So came, a slightly different angle, still obviously within the hospitality industry, but yeah, from hotels into this line of stadium catering, if you like.
Stadium catering, and when it comes back, it's going to come back with a vengeance, isn't it? That's for sure. Yes,
certainly. I mean, there's as you know, we split into sort of two sort of businesses within the sports stadia division. I think the demand for sport, as soon as that is open, it's going to be, whatever the capacities are set at, they'll fill. There's a real demand for that. I think from the conferencing and events side of things, I think it's somewhat slower, slightly slower. It's a big confidence thing, that, for people, I think, more than anything else, gathering in significant numbers in smaller spaces,
Yeah. So moving on to the exciting stuff that we're talking about today, in that mental health in the work environment type thing. We had worked together for quite a while before I'd ever mentioned sort of my mental health journey with you. I'm not entirely sure. I can't remember if it was if the first time you had heard about it was when I'd stood up on stage, or if we had had a conversation before. I have a feeling we might have had a conversation before. But when I did do that, what were your first thoughts? Did it surprise you? Did it change any way that you looked at me or the ability of me doing my job?
Not at all. I mean, I think the opposite, really, because it was a really brave move. And I can remember sat in that room. We were in Reading, weren't we?
Yeah.
Sat in that room that day when you did your presentation. You could have heard a pin drop in there, and people's faces were like, "Oh my God, this guy's like he's letting it all out." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think so. In answer to your question, it's the opposite, isn't it? Because you've got whilst you were held in really high regard, anyways, certainly by me, I think it went up another notch. It was a big deal. It was a big deal, and I think actually whilst it must have been difficult for you, as you watched it unfold in that room, I think it was more difficult for everybody else listening to it.
Yeah,
They didn't
yeah,
know
I
what
can
to do.
imagine.
You know, they're all going, "Oh my God, can't believe how brave he's been," and there was a few tears in there.
Yeah.
So actually, you were probably more in control than anybody.
Well, that's a scary thought because I was shaking and crying and
Yeah, it was good. Yeah, well, we know it went very well, and it was very well received. So,
yeah, and I suppose that was the start of this journey that we're on. I guess from my perspective, I think my concern maybe was that people like yourselves who are above me in terms of the work role, and you rely on me to deliver a job or deliver a service in terms of keeping your team safe. My concern was maybe that you wouldn't have had the confidence in me to deliver that going forward, just because of like knowing how my mind worked a little bit. Because I mean, we talked through 48 hours of me feeling suicidal during that presentation. And I think my biggest concern was actually thinking that maybe people wouldn't want to give me too much to do because they would feel like I would go back into that, which is the exact opposite of what I wanted to achieve. Did that thought ever cross your mind or anything like that, or was it just my imagination?
It was your imagination.
Okay, cool.
Well, there's a stigma attached to it, isn't there? Or there has been, you know,
Yes.
And that has got as this whole issue surrounding mental health has come more into play in life in general. The stigma it reduces. There's no doubt about it. And I've had experience, you know, from a member of my family in the same situation, and at least if you know what the situation is, you can formulate some sort of plan in how you can help. And often, well, certainly what I found, often, it's best to just shut up and listen.
Absolutely.
You know what? And you know I'm not good at that, shutting up. But because I remember being told, because it's hidden, you can't see it necessarily.
Yeah.
And you say, "Oh, you'll be all right. Don't worry about it. It's fine." That is the worst sentence ever.
Yeah.
Because that's like, you really don't understand what I'm going through here. Because you can't see it, you know, it's but it becomes more prevalent, I think. I listen to a radio station, and one of the presenters on there, he talks about his journey through this every day on this radio show. And the amount of if you look him up, Wyatt on Planet Rock, he talks about it constantly. He raises money for Calm. It's one of his chosen charities, because he's mid-40s, and that's the age bracket, that's the age group. You know, that's the group. And I think the more people talk about it, the more tolerant and understanding and helpful people will become generally, in the main. Not always, but you know, if you're talking about it, I think that's the point. Evan talks.
Exactly. I keep saying I didn't dig deep for the name, but it seems to be working quite well. Evan Talks as a name for a podcast. So you kind of alluded to it there a bit, where you've said about outside of like that radio DJ talking about it, and that I definitely feel like there's been a shift in mental health awareness recently, but that also might be because I'm looking for it a bit more, because obviously of what I'm doing and putting together the podcast. But what would you say? Would you say that there's been a shift? Have you noticed a shift both in the workplace and outside of work?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. It's like, think about a man thing, right?
Yeah.
Said somebody, are you actually really, are you all right? Are you okay? 20 years ago, people would have looked at you and gone, what?
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? The whole thing has changed. And I think when we take a look at ourselves, we all have a touch of something going on.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Mentally. I was thinking actually before we were talking today about sort of when I first started in the business, and it's all about maturity as well. A lot of this, I think, because I used to think that people who were going off the heads, or you couldn't tell with certain people from one day to the next what kind of mood you would find themselves in, and you just thought, God, what pain. But actually, there's something going on there, wasn't there?
Yeah.
I think we're more wired to it now. So it's not just somebody who's like having a bad day and it's just a bit crazy. There's more to it, and I think people are more inclined to talk about it now in an open forum as well.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely. I think people's mindsets have shifted, haven't they? Because like you said, where somebody was having a bad day, then you would have just assumed that they were having a bad day, and you wouldn't have asked them how they're doing or anything like that. But now, your first thought isn't, oh, they're having a bad day. Your first thought is, I should check on how they're doing.
Yeah.
I should ask them if there's anything I can do to help them. Which, like you say, 20 years ago, or even 10 years ago, you wouldn't have even thought about it. You were just going, oh, they're in a mood today, and walked away. But we are definitely changing. We are changing that mindset. And I suppose as a leader within the business that we work in, do you believe there's a different perception now in terms of employing people? So I remember when I was doing sort of a mental health, when the You Matters campaign was starting up, before it even became a You Matters campaign within Compass Group. Before that happened, we were in a room and we were talking about how we can be mental health ambassadors. And the question was asked in an interview, would you tell somebody that you've got a mental health issue? And I straight away said, yes, I would, because I have. When David employed me many years ago now, I brought it up as a sort of any other business type thing. And even when I was interviewed for the job with Twickenham Experience many years ago, I brought it up in the interview. And I remember Joe and Gary, who you know very well, were both a bit taken back, but it didn't change their perception of if I was able to do the job. So in your position, obviously, in looking at people at a higher caliber maybe than what I was at that stage, would you say that if somebody, I mean, it's difficult, I'm putting you on the spot, but would you say that if somebody came into an interview and said to you quite openly and honestly that they've had mental health issues in the past, would you second guess employing them, do you think?
No, I think I might ask them to, all right, do you want to talk about that a bit more?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because I think if somebody offers that's a positive, isn't it? It's got to be. Yeah. It's got to be taken as a positive. Because it goes back to that honesty, integrity. You got to know what you're dealing with, and if you know what you're dealing with, then we all have to adapt our behaviours at times. Yeah. And I think it's always better to know. In any situation, you might not always like what you find out, but it's better to know, isn't it? In my opinion.
Yeah, and I definitely feel like you've said it right there. You'd ask them to elaborate if they're comfortable in doing so, because if you're just kind of gone, thanks for letting me know, and walked out the room, and then you didn't employ them for some reason because there was maybe a better candidate or whatever, then they might sit there and think, oh, it's because I said that. Whereas if you showed interest and concern, then they'd feel a bit more comfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're working in a business that is advocating well-being, good mental health.
Yeah.
There's plenty of support and there's plenty of tools there to help support that. So you can't advocate all that and then go, oh no. No. It's just back to front, isn't it? You can't. You know me. All feet in or just not bothered. Just don't bother.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, get involved or get off is my view.
So I guess now thinking about what everyone's going through in the workplace, I hate bringing it up, but you can't ignore COVID and the long-term mental health effects that it's going to have had on people. Going into people that are kind of coming back into work that haven't been working for months on end, or have been working in different jobs, what would you kind of say to them as or if you were talking to your management team, what would you say to your management team about being aware of or how to manage those people in terms of their mental health?
It's a great question, timely as well, because we were we had a call yesterday, myself, Jane, Julie, and Jill.
Yeah.
And we were talking about remobilizing, reopening of the business. And one of the things, and as you can probably imagine, Jane picked this one up, was around what does a roadmap look like for people coming back in? You know, we've got to have a plan in place that reorientates people with the business, their colleagues who they might not have seen for, you know, a year, the best part of a year. Been able to sort of settle any anxieties that people might have. You know, when we did the test event at Quins, for example, and we had the welcome packs with all of the, you know, the sanitizers, and just makes people feel, all right, somebody's thinking about this, you know. And we've got to, you know, regardless of mental health, just as it's the right thing to do, full stop. We've got to make people want to come back to work and feel that they're safe. Yeah, it's as simple as that. And with that comes a whole raft of other things, but we need a bit of a plan. We can't just open the doors and expect people to get on with it.
And carry on like nothing's happened for the last 11 months. Because
you don't know what people have been through in the last 11 months personally.
No, you don't know.
So, you know, it's you've got to tread carefully on this one, and you know, do the right thing and take back to the thing I said about maybe just having a bit of a listen and gauge the mood and how things feel before you sort of steam in with your big mouth talking too much, you know.
Okay, that's great. I think that was a question that wasn't planned, so you responded to that one well. Okay, so in your opinion, what more can be done in society to further break down the mental health stigma? Because like you say, we are breaking it down, but in your opinion, do you think there's a way in which we can change the impact and how quickly we make an impact, or do you think it is going to carry on being a gradual process? I say it's a gradual process. I say the last 2 years I've seen real change happen. If you just look at the FA and what they were doing with Prince William and all the other stuff that's going on, all the different time to talk days, all the different things that are happening, which are great. What else do you think could be done, or do you think we're on the right track?
I think we're on the right track, and it's about ambassadors. I think the more high profile people that, you know, declare that they have currently or have had issues with their mental health, they become role models then. And, you know, if they're sort of reaching a massive audience who respect them or love them for what they do or whatever else it is, that to me has got to be the way forward. It's always been hidden before. I'm not going to say anything because I don't want people to think any less of me or whatever else. And, you know, and the more people that come out who you just wouldn't expect to suffer from this, I think that's massively powerful. You can write as many books as you want or whatever else. You need to see people face to face, look in their eyes.
Absolutely. And the more, like you said, the more high profile, the more exposure it gets, the better. But I also do feel like people should feel empowered to anyone should feel empowered to at least say that they've got a problem, even if it's just to their immediate family or their friends.
Yeah.
Because that will gradually have an impact too. If you just look at like, if they tell 5 people and then those 5 people start acting differently towards people with mental health, then that will lead on to something bigger too. So
yeah, agreed.
Final question, really, if you like. Top tips for you as a manager. If I was one of your managers and I came to you and I said that I've got a guy that works for me that has said that he's got a problem, what would you suggest to him?
I think I've already touched on it. You've got to listen.
Yeah.
That's it. It's that was my biggest. You can't fix this thing.
Yeah.
You know, if we're at work and something goes wrong operationally, you fix it. You can't fix this. There's a journey to go on here, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it doesn't always end. You know, people can suffer forever and ever. You know, some people learn to live with it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily mean that they're still not suffering, you know. So I think you've got to be patient. And I'll tell you, you know, my daughter, who knows that I might mention her on this today because I asked her if it was all right. It was the biggest lesson for me, and I think she appreciated the fact that I wasn't trying to tell her what to do, because she needed to work it out and talk it out, and somebody just needed to listen, and that for me was the key.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more, because the last thing you want when you go, I mean, when somebody sits down and says they're prepared to listen, and then they start giving you advice based on a 5-minute conversation when you may have been living with it for 20 years, like I have now, which is a scary thought by itself. But I mean, it kind of takes away the benefit of talking to somebody. I know it's difficult because you unload on somebody, don't you? But
yeah,
the difference would be that you can at least then, I suppose, hear yourself speaking out loud makes it easier, and hearing somebody else kind of just acknowledge that it's okay what you're feeling right now. I think that makes the biggest difference for me. And I know that when I speak to David when I'm having a bad day, I think he's gotten used to just listening. Yeah, he's gotten used to just listening, and it could be that he literally doesn't say anything other than, do you want to talk? And then I go for 45 minutes. But that's all I need. And then I feel better straight away. And then even just talking with you today and us having this conversation before we started recording, and even now, it makes me feel a little bit better. Like you know, I said to David the other day when we were talking about him joining me for an episode as well, another one, I said, I know you don't necessarily enjoy it. And he goes, oh, I actually find it quite therapeutic, because we actually just get to say stuff that we wouldn't necessarily normally talk about before. So yeah, I think listening is key, and just following up, I suppose, would be my only other thing to add to what you've said, is if somebody has that conversation with you, maybe follow up with them the next day, a couple of days. Don't check up on them, but just follow up and see if they're feeling any better or if they need to talk again. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think if you're making yourself available, aren't you? I think that's the key to it, you know.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely. But I think just touching on what you said there as well, conversations like this make you look inward as well.
Yeah.
It's what it's all about, isn't it? It's kind of, you know, you coming sort of around the circle now, you know, and we all have bad days for sure, no doubt. Some more than others,
and probably more recently than maybe before.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know if you were on. We had a call last week where we were talking about it with the whole leadership team, you know, and I said, and people were asking, but for examples of, how people have been feeling throughout this sort of the last 10 months, and what coping mechanisms you got in place.
Yep.
And so for me, it's the exercise, it's the music, hence it's all of that. That keeps me, that keeps me in a good place. I said, but there are days, and you can't put your finger on it, you actually feel like you could cry. And I've been, you know what I mean? I've been dead honest, but you don't know why. And I can't say I've gone into floods of tears, but there's days where you just think, I'm over it today. And I think it's probably just a combination of lots of small things. You're not able to just do what you want. You know what I mean? You can't just go out and go for a beer or anything. You're kind of restricted, and sometimes I think the walls sort of come in on you a little bit.
Yeah.
And then equally as quickly you kind of pull yourself, you brush yourself down and pull yourself together. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But there was quite a lot of nods on the screen at this point. People thinking, well, yeah, I get it, and things just come up on you without warning, and that's what I've found. So, there's a little bit of this in all of us, whether we admit it or not but there is,
Yeah, we've all got mental health. Just some of us has got good mental health, and some of us has got not so good mental health.
There we are. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for joining me today. I really did enjoy it. Hopefully you enjoyed it. It wasn't like going to the dentist or anything.
No, it was fabulous. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, thank you. And for everyone else, thank you for listening. We are going to be moving on to the next topic from the next week's episode, and then we will just carry on this journey. And if you've missed any of the previous episodes, or if you want to catch up on anything, please do go and have a look at my website, which is evantalks.com, and you can find out more about me and my story, but also listen to all the previous episodes through the podcast player on there. Thanks, everyone, and look after yourselves and look after each other. Thank you for listening to Evan Talks. And if you'd like to know any other information about Evan Talks, or you would like to get involved, please check out evan-talks.com for more information.